Huzzah!
Hmm.
Hmm.
But what are
Uh,
we talking about?
okay, so I brought a few questions. We can talk about whatever we want, but the first question I wanted to start, because we're now doing audio as well as our Instagram thing, is how do you feel about our new movie a day thing? Several months into it.
Well, 2 months into it, right?
Yeah, two is several, right? I don't know.
It's giving me a purpose in life right now when things are kind of strange and shapeless. I'm really enjoying it. I
I'm
am
really enjoying
having
it
a,
too.
yeah, I am having a problem lately where it's a little harder to think of what to watch sometimes, but it's not hard
I'm
to find things to watch. It's
I was
almost more
gonna
hard to make
say
a decision.
well, Jill was talking about this the other day. My girlfriend Jill, for those at home, was talking about how like she almost misses the days of Blockbuster where you'd like go in and there'd be like, you had a finite amount of options, and often the movies that you wanted to rent weren't available because they were the most popular. And of course, with streaming, there's just so many options.
Yeah, but there's also like, I'm nothing is ever good or bad, but thinking makes it so. But what I'm trying to say is I think streaming is overall positive, but like everything, like there are some downsides too. One of them I've noticed is movies that just don't exist in streaming. And the funny thing is,
Yeah.
in the days of Blockbuster, it would have been like, well, you only had so many. But now it's like, why is it I wouldn't be able to see this movie when it like, and there are movies like I was wanting to watch Less Than Zero, which I've never seen, but I've read the book, but I understand the movie's very different and it has Robert Downey Jr. in it. The only way to stream it is if you have direct TV. So it's like it
Uh,
exists. You can stream it under this very specific circumstance. But it also it's fracturing so much. It's like you used to go to Blockbuster, your favorite video store, there'd be the new arrivals,
yeah.
da da da. Now it's like, well, do I go to Netflix? Do I go to Prime? I find the Criterion channel hard to navigate. So you end up like having to be more specific in your searches.
Well, I have one of the critics I listen to, Alonso Duralde, is kind of, I don't know if he's exactly big into physical media, but him, and I've also heard Leonard Maltin and Jesse Maltin talk about how like Alonso Duralde talks about how like he gets this physical media because he wants to be able to watch it at any times because movies just disappear from your streaming service. And the Maltons have had an actual episode about like things they used to watch on VHS and Laserdisc or whatever and DVD, and how like there are things that just didn't port and have never ported from VHS or DVD to streaming. And
Yeah.
so as somebody myself who I just am not into like physical media that much because I just don't care about the space it takes up. A couple months ago when we moved into this new place, I realized, I wanted to have some physical media, which is why I'm like getting into the box sets because they look pretty. Like I like physical media that looks pretty and has a purpose. Like I don't mind that I have a kind of generic copy of Little Women because I really like that movie, but someday when they release a nicer version of it, I'll probably upgrade. So,
Yeah, I don't care about that as much. My problem is I like really funky, weird movies that are hard to find sometimes. And are more likely to drop off the face of the earth.
well, yeah, Joe was just looking for some Italian parody, or I don't know if it was a parody. I think that's what it was saying. It was of Fantasia,
Mhm.
and she was like, "Yeah, it's not streaming anywhere, and it costs $200 to get a DVD, or it costs like $80 for a VHS."
Well, Dad said that there's a Leslie Caron film where she's not playing an infantilized object of desire for a much older man, and it's called The L-Shaped Room, and it is available if you want to pay $90 for a DVD. It is not available anywhere else. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
think it'll be interesting. The other thing is that nothing ever stays the same, so I don't see us existing in this particular situation forever. But I'm like not sure what happens next. And it's making me think about that documentary that we missed that I kind of still want to see about the woman who recorded all that VHS
oh
tape.
yeah, yeah, I want to see that too. I forget what the name of that was now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's just, it's the only copy of these, points in time.
Yeah, well, and I always like because I worked very briefly for that company that I worked in the international distribution center of a company that basically sold the rights to the film before it was made to make enough money to then make the movie. And because of that, I have a little understanding of how contracts and stuff work. And I can just see how there are some movies that a studio owned and went out, like it was owned by some small distribution company once, or the production, somehow the rights went to somebody other than the distribution company, and then it disappeared, and then somebody else bought it, and then it was bought, and then it ends up in this weird legal battle where it's like you have the distribution, who owns the distribution rights, or maybe it's like somebody owns the distribution rights here but not there, and because your platform works a certain way, and I don't know, there's also that aspect to it too.
Well, and a friend of mine has talked about how there are movies on Amazon Prime that do not exist. It's the opposite thing. There's movies on Amazon Prime that don't exist anywhere else, like these super weird horror films that like you cannot find on IMDb, and yet they exist on Amazon Prime. So it's an interesting thing.
I mean, you and me have like multiple streaming services each, and I'm even going to be purchasing HBO Max at some point because it has a few things that I want, and I already have the Criterion Channel and Amazon Prime and Netflix.
Well, but that's what's so, I just had to install a new app in order to watch the Peanut Butter Falcon, and it's just like, you feel like I'm a member. And then there's, weird things like Disney owning films now that aren't really on brand for them, and what I've heard about that more to do with screenings than streaming, but still.
Well, and there's a lot of other baggage that goes with Disney that let's not get into.
Well, but you just think about stuff like that. What if a company owns a film they don't want you to see because it's not on brand for them? It's like, wow.
And then it disappears into the ether.
Yeah, it's theirs now, I guess.
I feel like I'm not a doomsayer necessarily on the Disney stuff or just the whole like streaming wars in general. I think like a lot of people, this isn't a sustainable model for the universe, because like most people are going to not subscribe enough. Like maybe there is enough people that are going to subscribe to make it worth it, but I kind of doubt that, because the whole point of streaming originally was that you had more consolidation of things than there was on TV, and it was easier to watch. Whereas now you don't have as much consolidation, so streaming has just turned into like a slightly more complicated
it's just frustrating
TV package.
Yeah, and it's just frustrating to find things like La Dolce Vita. When you look it up on Just Watch, it's not anywhere, but it turns out you can rent it through a certain subscription with Amazon Prime, and it's like, I don't mind paying money to rent a movie, but I can't find them. And sometimes they're there. So I've started looking on Just Watch first and then Amazon, just to see if it's through some subscription that Just Watch isn't aware of. So
yeah, Just Watch I found is almost always accurate, which is nice because you really want to have something.
It's wrong about Canopy sometimes, because Canopy changes stuff up, but it's so, you got to start somewhere, and you don't want to spend your time individually searching each of these. There's so many streaming services. No,
it's just
although
impossible.
It is funny, because in the days of Blockbuster, I used to spend like 2 hours trying to decide what movie to watch, which like technically I could have rented a movie, gone home, watched it, and brought it back in the time that I was trying to decide on a movie. So that was a thing.
I think that's still an issue, except now it's like, well, you're on Amazon and you're looking at all these different movies and you're like, well, I don't know. And then you go to Criterion and you spend like a half an hour there and you're like, well, and then you go to Canopy to see if there's like some weird title there. And it's like,
yeah, I've really tried not to let myself. It's like, just pick something and watch it. Just do it. It's either good or bad. Something's going to happen. Just do it.
Yeah. Because me and Jill have gotten to the point where like, we're no longer like spending a lot of time looking for a movie. Usually there are always exceptions to the rule, but like we've gotten good. Because this way, if we do it just right, we can actually fit in 2 movies in the evening, which is nice.
I have another kind of modern phenomenon I've been thinking about. It's probably a shorter discussion, but I just was curious if you'd ever noticed this. I don't know how long Wikipedia has even existed, because it's not that long. But in the early days, I would fall in love with these obscure films, and you'd either not find them on Wikipedia, or it would be like, 1967 stars these guys. The end. But I've noticed, like with Alien Prey, every time I check, the entry gets longer and longer. And with No Name on the Bullet, it's actually still shorter than Alien Prey. But these are both like pretty obscure movies. Not the most obscure. Alien Prey should probably be more obscure than No Name on the Bullet, but
it's more of a cult film, so
yeah, but I think that. But No Name on the Bullet, like apparently Joe Dante likes No Name on the Bullet. Like that information was not in the Wikipedia article the first time I looked for it. So it's interesting. It's interesting to keep coming back to Wikipedia to see if like other people like this thing and have updated, and the entry is slowly growing or not.
I enjoy finding going to like it almost never happens, but occasionally I'll find a movie, and I mean if it's not on Wikipedia I usually can't watch it, but occasionally you can. Like there's a few movies I've watched, usually they're foreign and obscure because you need both those things to happen for this to work, where the only reference is on like the director's filmography or something, or on the actor's filmography, and there is no page whatsoever.
I feel like I encounter that with actors more. Like this person only did this one film, so you don't have a hyperlink.
I get a joy out of like finding those films where like you can't find a Wikipedia entry, and it's like, oh,
yeah,
I'm one of the few, even though it's not true, and it doesn't matter anyways. But
yeah, but apparently Joe Dante likes No Name on the Bullet, so hey.
I mean, hey, I do too. So
he directed Gremlins.
I know who
other
he is.
Stuff, yeah.
I mean, I know Joe Dante as the guy who did Gremlins, and I also know him as the guy who killed Leonard Maltin.
Oh right, he did.
Which yes, not in real life for those watching, but Leonard Maltin is still alive and well.
Yeah. Yes.
A second part of my question for like now, I mean, this was supposed to be about how I liked how they started with watching new movies a day and went into streaming and all that.
Yeah.
How has it been writing on Instagram every day and doing like a writing, like we're actively writing like every day? I think it's actually helping my writing get better.
Yeah, I think so for that. I am struggling a little with the movies that hit the middle. Like we watched 39 Steps yesterday. It was better than The Deep, which I am not going to write about. You wrote about The Deep. We're good. That is all that needs to be said about The Deep. But like 39 Steps, it's an early Hitchcock. It's Hitchcock. It's the mid-30s. World War II hasn't happened yet. Like there are movies where I'm like, this is my point of view. Like Lily. Like I could write more about Lily because I just think it's such weird potential, twisted horribly wrong.
I've actually gotten you've made Lily interesting to me, although I still don't know that I want to watch it. But
I'm not. You probably wouldn't. But
yeah, but so because like
he
Rounders
slaps her. He slaps her, and they put it off screen. And I was showing my boyfriend, and I'm like, "Look, he slapped her, but it was off screen." He's like, "How much more do you think he slaps her off screen?" It's like it's so dark.
Well,
yeah.
I finally ran into that issue with Rounders because I just didn't have much to say about the movie. Like, and the thing is, I don't want, it's like those things where it's like, you don't want people to think that the movie is bad. It's not bad. And somewhere out there, many people out there probably liked Rounders. But to me, it was so achingly average. I just couldn't come up with much to say about it. The Deep, I could at least be a little snarky and talk about Jacqueline Bisset's assets.
Yeah.
Because like, that was the takeaway from the film. It made me feel a little misogynistic, but
I mean, the film is a little misogynistic.
So
I think I've decided that I don't have to write. I had already decided I wasn't writing about every rewatch. I just can't. But also, I have to write about a movie a day. So if the only movie I see that day that's to talk about, I'll talk about, if I see one movie, I'll just talk about that movie. Well, and I'm debating a little because yesterday I rewatched No Name on the Bullet, which of course I can write about. But I also saw 39 Steps, and it's just not interesting to say, like, I'm medium on Hitchcock. Like,
well, you've already done things where, like, you've watched, I'm a completionist sometimes, not as much as some people, but like, that's why I write about everything pretty much. So, but like you've done things where you've watched a second new movie in the day because you're like, I have nothing to say about this, so I'm going to watch something else.
Yeah, I did that early on. So we'll see. I probably will write about 39 steps because I think there's still something. There's also just, I feel like I'm repeating myself sometimes, and kind of like Playtime was oddly a struggle to write about. And I eventually did realize that I kept thinking of that Luke Wilson. Was that Owen? No, that was Luke, right? In you read what I wrote, Midnight in Paris.
Oh, no, that was Owen Wilson.
I think I wrote that it was Luke. Might need to go edit that. Anyway, but like I found like something, a place to start to kind of try and say something interesting. But that one was weirdly hard. And I didn't even go into how it felt like an animated, it felt like it had these qualities that like an animation might have.
Yeah, well, because he built the sets, like he didn't just build a set, he built the whole thing as a set. So he did, I don't know how to say his name, Jacques Tati, just did whatever he wanted there with Playtime. Like I had found my inroad was that like it's a sci-fi movie.
Well,
it isn't, but it is.
Did you like my thing about absurdism is the flip side of existentialism, basically, which I don't think is philosophically correct, but I think for what I'm talking about, it is.
I think you have a point there. Yes, I liked that.
Yeah. So it's a good practice. Sometimes, our mother said some of my posts are better than others. Like,
I think I agree. Well, some of my posts are better than others. I mean, I like it because it's more of a diary, and it's like I'm not trying to be a perfectionist about it.
Right, and we're not. Oops. We're not we're doing this for ourselves, so our readership doesn't really matter. I'm just delighted when people read my stuff. But it's also like some of my favorite things to write about have gotten the least likes because it's like some obscure film no one cares about.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But it just, it's a reminder that it's for me.
Yeah,
no one cares about what I think about Lily, apparently.
Well, it's also like we've actually been gaining followers, which is amusing to me on Insta. I didn't on Instagram, but also like we don't have a big audience or anything, and we are really. I think of this as like we're doing this for us first, our friends and family second, and then extended acquaintances, which is basically everybody on social media to me because I don't really interact with people a lot on social media. Occasionally my actual friends or family, I interact with on social media, but like that's like my order of operations. So I've been enjoying the writing because I do actually think it's helping me write about movies and really get back into like an academic I don't know about academic intellectual, but like it's helping me think about movies in a different way, which is helping how I'm like looking at things. But
I do think your posts have been better lately. But then again, it's hard when you're like, it's the deep, and you're like, well, someone really loves this movie and people worked hard on it, but it didn't do. You didn't even mention the 3 boats sinking on top of each other thing.
I couldn't find out if it was the deep where, for the viewers at home, I've always had this story that someone told me about how they were writing a movie and the screenwriter was writing a movie, and the real story is that 3 boats sank at different times and ended up on top of each other in this region of the ocean or whatever somewhere. And the producer or whoever was working on the script with them was like, that's not believable. You should just do 2 ships.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes life is stranger than fiction. Like, anyways, so let's talk about targets, because I want to talk about targets.
Yeah. So what do you want to go first? What you thought about it?
Yeah. Okay. So
you're watching Peter Bogdanovich have a party with Boris Karloff, and then this guy shoots a bunch of people.
Yeah. Like, okay. So there's that aspect that's a little weird, but I first wanted to.
Well, should we set it up a little bit for? I mean, I'm not sure what the viewership on this is going to be either, but.
Okay. Let's set up. Okay. So, Targets is about an ailing horror actor played by Boris Karloff.
Who's older.
Who is older. I mean, he's basically playing himself. Who is, I guess, tired or finished with film, or is feeling a bit aged out of importance or whatever. And so he's going through a a minor life moment, a life, I don't know about crisis, but a life moment, a crisis maybe, at the same time as a young man is going through some kind of crisis, maybe. And mostly what you find about him in the start is that has a lot of guns. I think I want to just spoil things, by the way. I don't think we care about spoilers.
Yeah, well, if anyone's watching right now, we're going to talk about the entire plot of Targets.
Yeah.
An early Peter Bogdanovich film.
I think it's his first feature.
Roger Corman produced, and we heard Roger Corman talk about it in person.
Right. Okay, so that's the setup for the movie. You have Boris Karloff plus Peter Bogdanovich is playing a screenwriter and director, I believe, who is trying to who's worked with Boris Karloff's character, whose name is Byron Orlock, which is just the most like Boris Karloff, Byron Orlock. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
They've worked on movies, so like that's another character. But yeah, so it's like it's this funny thing. Okay, so I think that's pretty goofy that Peter Bogdanovich is like, let's get Boris Karloff for this and let's make it about Boris Karloff. I don't know what he was like in real life. I want to go back and listen to that episode of You Must Remember This that Karina Longworth did, because I think she talks about Targets and how it's like this late stage moment for Boris, and how people think it was that episode where people think of Bela Lugosi as having this really like sad ending, except his ending wasn't completely that sad. Like he had these people he was working with who liked him, and people think of Boris Karloff as having more of like this noble ending or something, but it's, and I'm like, I want to go back and listen to that episode because I thought his performance in this was great. I loved Boris Karloff in this movie. It's two different movies happening at once. Well, okay, it's two different plots happening at once. There's two main plots to this one movie. It's not quite the same as having two different movies happening at once, but it is two main plots happening in the same movie, kind of. And I don't know that I fully buy into the mass murder shooter guy's arc. Like I don't really know what his arc is. And I think the movie, this is like, I don't know how much like psychological research had been done by the time of this film to really understand how mass shooters work. So I don't know that the movie is like trying to be that in depth about it. So I don't know that I fully buy into it. It feels a bit like, I guess, dated in that sense where it's like, I don't really know if that represents reality, but I also appreciated like how the movie is, my take on Targets is that Boris Karloff is feeling irrelevant, Byron Orlock is feeling irrelevant in his old age because nobody's really scared of him in this world that is full of all these modern travesties. Mind you, I think Frankenstein came out around like either just before or just after World War II, so I'm not sure how that works if you really think about that. But the point being is there's all these weird, he's like feeling,
Frankenstein's before World War II.
That's what I thought. Like, so it's like, 30s. So I always find it funny when people talk about like, oh, there's so many more modern troubles, and it's like, I don't, we've always been having troubles. But yeah, I get his feeling, and so he's feeling, like it doesn't matter anymore, and why would anyone be scared of him when there's all these real things to be scared of? But I like that the whole movie is kind of about this guy, the other guy, our mass shooter, is just some guy. He's just some doofus running around shooting people, and it's horrifying what he's doing, but he himself is just some guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a great reason for what he's doing. He might have some sort of mental issue or mental disorder. I mean, who knows, mental illness. And how at the end, the truth is that like what he's doing is horrifying, but he's not horrifying. Whereas the characters that Byron Orlock played might have actually been horrifying in maybe like the fantastical sense, but are actually kind of horrifying. Like they're more about like the horror in a person almost. And so I kind of like that last line he has, even though it's a bit on the nose, where he says, this is what I was afraid of? And it's just this cowering white dude.
Yeah.
So like, that's kind of my take on it. I actually really like Targets. It's another one of these, either it's his first or one of his first, Peter Bogdanovich's first movies. And there is often some people, like I really like Neuromancer, which is William Gibson's first novel. And there's something about how raw it is, and like the editing doesn't always work, they're missing coverage in places, sometimes intentionally. I think sometimes it just felt like they were missing it. But there's like there's something kind of raw and rough and really interesting about someone's first piece of work. Like there's a level of like, I like, not everybody, like Kurosawa's first movies, they're fine. I don't think they're not raw or rough the way that I think that like this movie is. And I think Targets is not, like, often they're not as good as like later works necessarily by the same person who did them. Or I mean, films are a huge crew, so there's that to it too. But like there's something, but like there is something, I often find them more interesting maybe than like The Last Picture Show is a better movie than Targets, but there might be something kind of interesting about Targets before it being this rough, raw work.
Yeah, well, I think you have kind of also two different things that happen. Sometimes low budgets mean they can't do what they really want to do. And
Right.
sometimes, so you have, I don't know, like Steven Soderbergh, like I know Sex, Lies, and Videotape is not as technically good as, but I like Sex, Lies, and Videotape more than most of his newer stuff. It just was weird, you know. I like that. Whereas like a John Carpenter, like I think he was able to do low budget what he wanted to do with more budget, so it feels more consistent.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I once watched, we were watching bad horror films, and I was watching one with Kirby once, and I was like, this is 2 movies edited together. And it was literally 2 movies that were edited together into one film. So it was just, I felt proud of myself for figuring that out. But yeah, I pretty much agree with you on Target. So the young man who ends up being the mass shooter is based on Charles Joseph Whitman.
Right, the tower shooter. There's a documentary, I think, about it that I've heard is really good. I think. Let me look that up.
Yeah, and he was a war veteran, and I don't know enough to say anything truly insightful about him, but I think in the movie, like, he writes a suicide note, and like he was aware that there was something wrong with him, but it was the 1960s. You know, there wasn't, I mean, support for that kind of, I mean, who knows? We still have mass shooters, so
the documentary is called Tower, and it's in 1966, and this guy who took over the top floor of the Texas Tower and opened fire. That's the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's the guy it's based on. Like, yeah. Obviously in Targets, it's moved to California. He's shooting people off the 101, right? You know.
Well, it's the 405, actually, I think.
Is it?
It's the 405.
It's out in the
right?
valley.
It's the 405 right before it before it intersects the 101. Like, okay. I used to, what was amusing was like, there's a mall now that wasn't there back in 68, or I think that's when Target was made, 68. Yeah, 68, or when it was released. There's a mall there now, but like that's where you come over the hill and you come down, and like you can like exit off and get to the like arc light right there, or you can keep going up to like Covina. Anyways, but it was amusing to see that and be like, oh yeah, here we are in LA. I know this drive really well, and oh good, I'm glad I wasn't there in, you know, the era of this movie when people were when that guy was shooting people.
I know, and then I went to a drive-in and I was like, I actually thought about Target. I think I pretty much agree with you. I don't think I took it as deep as you. There's definitely the sense of like Boris Karloff as like the old horrors, which are like these creepy supernatural things, and then like the modern horror, which is just this guy with a gun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, you know, but that's all he really is. Like there's no character to him.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I kind of like that he doesn't have character, and he is kind of this, like, it really just demystifies. There were so many mass shootings before the lockdown, you know, before the pandemic started, that people had grown numb to it and are probably still numb to it. But like, I kind of like that there was this demystification of it, where it's like, what these people do is horrifying, but these people are just, I mean, like the guy who's does it in the movie Targets is an idiot. He keeps dropping his gun. He's just running around doing, like, there's no plan.
Yeah.
People always think there's a sophistication or a reason to things sometimes. And I kind of like that this is a bit more messy than that and complicated.
Isn't it funny how, not funny, like ha ha ha, but like strange that after, you know, this lockdown happens, everybody's watching Contagion and Outbreak, but after mass shootings, people aren't like, let's watch Targets.
Yeah, I
There's something more
wonder.
visceral about a mass
I
shooting than a virus, maybe. I mean, and
maybe it
not
has.
everybody's watching Contagion or
Well,
anything,
yeah, my girlfriend
but
doesn't want to. We had to
but then
kind
but
of push her to watch Outbreak.
but there enough people were that it was a thing.
Oh yeah, well, and I mean, it's. I don't know that I trust Netflix top 10 thing that they're doing, but like it was on that list.
Yeah,
I feel like a part of it is also that like I wonder if it's like the gore factor. Like a mass
yeah.
shooting, there's just so much more like physical destruction to a body, whereas with a contagion, with an out like a pandemic, there isn't visible. The visible signs are
I
less.
think we
Or
also imagine we can control whether or not we catch a virus more than we can whether somebody randomly
yeah,
shoots us in the street.
yeah, that makes
But
sense.
yeah, and there is also a lot of fun in that movie and just watching Boris Karloff drinking like a fish and getting Peter Bogdanovich drunk and in bed with him,
Yeah,
and stuff like that. And I mean,
yeah,
if that, it's so funny. I think a lot about Rotten Tomatoes and aggregators and like, well, this movie's a 41%, which is like meaningless at the end of the day. And
yeah.
it's like, because there's so many different reasons you might watch a movie.
Oh,
And like,
completely.
why not watch Targets because you want to see Peter Bogdanovich drunk in bed with Boris Karloff? I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid reason
Yeah,
to watch a
well,
movie.
I mean, I'm a completionist, so I often watch things that are just a part of a director's filmography, or maybe
Yeah.
they, like at this point, I keep seeing films with Jerry Goldsmith doing the. I've watched. I don't know. Maybe I just keep noticing him, but I'm like curious about some of the movies he scored that he hasn't. That So it's like,
Well, I'm seeing, it's funny because Laszlo Kovacs was and I could be pronouncing his name wrong. I pronounce everything wrong, and people comment about it on YouTube, and I don't care. Except I do, but I don't. But I kept seeing his name show up. I kept seeing Dean Cundy's name show up. Like, I don't notice
I saw it.
cinematography.
Yeah, I noticed those names. So I feel like I'm becoming more. My film nerd cred is going up. I'm noticing the names of more than just the director and the actors.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, I was actually curious because I don't know if I've seen Laszlo Kovacs' name was familiar to me, but I'm like, where do I know him from?
so he did the cinematography for that. I can really quickly look up what
Well,
else.
I'm looking it up too. He did Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Um,
He did Easy Rider,
he did
5
Your
Easy
Shampoo,
Pieces.
which might be.
That's the one. The other one I'd recently seen him like.
Oh, and he did. Oh, he did a bunch of films for Peter Bogdanovich. He did Targets, What's Up, Doc.
Probably saw him on What's Up Doc then because
Yeah,
we watched that
Ghostbusters. He
recently.
did Ghostbusters. That's funny. Like looking at these movies he's done, I think he has a more like his style is a little more. I don't know if gritty is the word. It's a little flatter. People always think when you use the term flat, well, I say people, but some
Yeah.
people think when you use the word flat that you're talking about it in like a bad sense.
People
But
think you're assigning value judgments to things when you're just trying to describe them. It's the
something,
story
yeah.
of my life, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it, but like, yeah, like he seems like he has kind of like thinking of like What's Up, Doc, and this like he has like interesting camera angles, but in some ways his shots are kind of flat, and it's kind of interesting. Like I thought it worked for Targets really well.
Yeah.
What's Up, Doc is a difficult movie for me to rate in any way. I thought it was filmed well, so
Yeah.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind though isn't nearly as flatly shot as like Targets is though. So anyways,
I
interesting.
mostly remember the plot of that and the ending where it's like, really?
Oh yeah. Well, that's Close Encounters of the Third Kind it's I don't know. I like it, but it's not.
It's
I
not
like
that I dislike it. It just, look,
the
don't assign
stories.
value judgments to me, man. I don't like your rules. Well, I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to talk to you about No Name on the Bullet, but we've talked for a while, so I don't know.
I don't. We're going to talk as long as we want, and if you want to talk about No One on the Bullet, let's talk about it.
Well, I kind of want to, and then I personally have reasons. This is not my like attractive blue on blue that I'm planning to wear for the rest of the day. This is my workout outfit. So,
Right.
So I love No Name on the Bullet, which is an Audie Murphy film, and most
Yeah.
Audie Murphy films are not great. He's not a great actor. He's not given great material to work with. It just kind of, he's not a terrible actor either, but a lot of the Westerns he's in are silly, but I always watch them because I don't actually like Westerns that much.
Right.
But you watch Westerns, and I've decided, I was thinking about it earlier, it's like, I hate to be dismissive of something because it's masculine because I think that being dismissive of things because they're feminine is not a great look.
Yeah.
But, you know, some people don't like chick flicks, and I don't like dick flicks that much. That's just kind of how it goes. But I'll watch them, and
That's not entirely true, though. You liked Western a lot, and that is a
but
Western.
Again, it's subversive. It's subversive, and so is No Name on the Bullet.
That's fair.
So I'm interested in because you really liked it. You really like No Name on the Bullet.
I think it's a hidden gem. I'll need to rewatch it to really know for sure. But like,
but you like Westerns, and you like these very masculine movies.
Well, what's funny is masculinity, because we were talking about this with Western. So, well, spoilers for No Name on the Bullet. We won't spoil any of these other movies we're talking about. But like, Western weirdly made me almost more uncomfortable. It wasn't that it was
the
subversive.
Movie Western,
The
which
movie
is a more
Western.
Recent
German,
Bulgarian, German,
Bulgarian German film, something like that. But like, made me more like uncomfortable. Like it made me uncomfortable, and I wasn't always sure about like the thematicness of it, but it really worked for you. And it could be that I don't think it's that it was subversive, but like our approach to masculine things is very different. I'm just now realizing this because I really like noirs. I think there's a misconception to me, and I needed to think about this, that noirs are like about masculinity, but I don't know that they are.
We're going way off topic, but here's what I've been noticing.
It's going to come back to No Name on the Bullet.
And I can kind of pin down a little better. You are more uncomfortable with women potentially being exploited, and more comfortable with movies about that are heavily masculinity focused at the expense of women, or more interested in, maybe is a better word for it. Whereas I am not that interested in heavily masculine movies, but I am less concerned about women being exploited in general. I mean, like,
yeah. I
mean, I've heard of really vile like films where women have been, you know, and I don't like that. But you'll be concerned without knowing whether any, like Hard to Die is the one we're thinking about, where you're still kind of like, and I'm like, they were adult actresses doing this as a career move. It's fine. As far as I can tell, it's fine. So there's this interesting thing where, like, it's just this interesting balance.
Well, and so here's my take though on it too. So I kind of get what you're saying, and you might be right, whatever. But
usually I am.
But I think that film noirs are not as masculinity focused as I think they are sometimes thought of. I think there is a feminine interest in noirs that kind of is overlooked. I don't know. I have to do more watching and more research because I haven't seen that many noirs or anything, but I have this kind of theory I'm percolating in my head where it's like, noirs are always told from the perspective of a man, except for stuff like Mildred Pierce or something, which is a great movie and is partially great because it really breaks with the formula. But so it's like always from the perspective of a man. It's often about a man's masculinity. There's all this stuff about men and guns and, you know, the penis and all that stuff and what that means, you know, symbolically. But I think that I kind of think that noirs are also about femininity and feminine issues, but from a masculine perspective, which is kind of fascinating to me because often they're so tortured and weird and wrong, at least in my modern way of thinking. And I think there's this undercurrent of femininity to noir movies that that interests me. Like Gilda is about Glenn Ford's character and George, whatever his name is, and then Rita Hayworth. But like, to me, there's such an undercurrent of femininity in that movie because it's all about where Gilda is and like what she can or can't do. And like, it's told from this masculine perspective and it's, you know, butt backwards, but like I think there's this interesting, but it kind of is also about her femininity and how that is in the world. And it's, in some ways, it's easier to watch a regressive old film where some of these actresses might really have been taken advantage of more so than in Hard to Die. because they're both older and because they were more stars and gained more from it in terms of like a real world, like Rita Hayworth made a decent bit of money and got some real power in her life, even if it came with all these bad things. Whereas Hard to Die, I'm not sure what power but anyways, it's complicated. But I think there's this, am I making sense? Do you kind of get
You
what I'm saying?
are. I disagree with you on some things, but you're making sense. I think I have trouble with the noir archetypal woman. Like I get what it is, but on a personal level, like Lily, she's this naive country girl, like naive to the point of ridiculousness, but it makes her come off a little crazy. And I'm way more on board with that on a personal level than like the femme fatale, because I don't personally relate to that character, which isn't to say like, so it shouldn't exist or anything like that. Just to say, this is why I have trouble getting into them.
Some of it is also that in noirs in particular, and also in Westerns, to bring it back to No Name on the Bullet, sometimes women's only agency in these movies, not only agency, but usually like their main agency is sex.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see how different movies interact with that.
And I'm not that into that, to be honest. Yeah. But I do like women in lingerie with machine guns shooting people. I don't know. I cannot explain that to you at the moment.
I mean, I can't explain my thing with noirs either, because they're totally regressive in a lot of ways. So anyways.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't, But anyway, back to No Name on the Bullet, which is almost a sexless movie in a way. There's one women character. Luna is having issues right now. There's one woman character.
She's always having issues.
It's hard being a Luna.
No.
There is one woman character, and I actually think she's fine for the movie. Like, it's the doctor's fiance.
Yeah. Isn't she also the daughter of?
And the daughter of the judge. Yes.
Yeah. No suckling during.
I'm trying to stop her. And it's interesting because it's not.
Well, should we set up No Name on the Bullet?
Okay, John Gant is played by Audie Murphy, one of the only kind of villainous roles he plays, and he is come to this town to kill someone.
He has come
to this town to kill someone, and no one knows who, and the nice, respectable people of this town start freaking the heck out, because it turns out a lot of people have secrets, and so half the town is convinced that he's there to kill them. And I don't see it as such a masculinity story, because it's actually more about hypocrites and hypocrisy is the word I was trying to get to there. Yeah. Because I was noticing on this rewatch that here you have all these nice, good-seeming people, but the moment this guy shows up, you learn that like a bunch of them have gotten to where they've gotten by doing terrible things themselves.
Yeah.
And there's this moment where the judge kind of hypothesizes as to what made Gant the way he is, the Audie Murphy character the way he is. And it has to do with him falling in with the wrong crowd and a gang. But I think, and the movie's not explicit, and I'm reading into it here, but you could read from that he is kind of poor and less respectable. So he's this killer. But meanwhile, you have all these respectable people, and even the judge himself at one point says, I should be in jail for the things I did.
Yeah. Well,
and then you have the doctor, who's the only genuine, and his father maybe, are the only genuinely good people in the movie.
As far as we know, yeah.
Right. The saloon keeper really doesn't have he's just kind of a herald. And then there's those old guys that are kind of funny.
Yeah.
But as far as like the real plot movers in the story, he's the only person who is what he says he is. And that's why Gant really likes him.
Yeah.
But he ends up in his efforts to kind of maintain status quo, screwing Gant over. And Gant is just bemused by it all, because he kind of sees like, he doesn't care. These people are all hypocrites. And when the doctor, really screws him over, he's like, well, it's going to happen one day, one way or another.
Yeah, well, there's like two aspects to this movie that are that I have like two modern takes on this. One isn't exactly there's a heavy aspect of this movie that's about paranoia,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in today's world where there's all this social media stuff that's going on that I'm not a part of because I'm not really on social media, but I hear about because I watch things and I try to not be too oblivious. There's like an aspect to No Name on the Bullet where you can have a modern reading of the film that has to do with cancel culture and like mob mentality and all this stuff on social media, I think, and like how we react to someone coming for us in that sense, and like your history may not be perfect, like well, how are you treated now, even if your history is imperfect, what you did in the past may be bad or may have
Mm-hmm.
been, but are you a better person now, like there's that aspect to it. Like it's not like it's a modern take on it. It isn't. I don't know that it's really what the film. I don't know anything about the making of the movie, so there's not a lot to that. But like, there's that aspect to it. And the second thing is because we've had several versions of the Joker show up in film media, over the past decade. I think that our character Joe Gantz, is that his name?
I think it's John Gant, but yeah,
John Gantz,
Gant's. You know.
Audie Murphy's character Gantz. I think he's not the Joker or anything, but I think he fits into that mold of character. And I was only realizing it as we're talking, but I think a part of Gan's thing is like he understand, like when you understand, there's this idea in art and in, I don't know, psychology, that in artistic psychology, probably not in real psychology, that like if you know too much, it almost like it means it like grants you this superpower. Like the Joker's superpower is that like he understands the chaos of the world or something.
Yeah.
And like Gantz's superpower is that he understands that everybody is bad. Like he almost understands that everybody is bad and good. And like a part of that is just like he doesn't say anything for large sections of the films. He's just sitting there watching people freak out.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I like how subtle and understated that is. Like it, like he doesn't tell you his history so much because it doesn't matter. Like you learn a little bit about him. Like, and to him, there's almost an amusement in like the Doctor character and how he's like corrupting the Doctor character. Like the Doctor character is Batman and Gantz is, Joker. It's not that story, but it's that same kind of story where Gantz is kind of getting some enjoyment out of the Doctor kind of being so morally in turmoil over things,
Yeah. I don't think he's corrupting him. In fact, I think it's a shame he doesn't, because I think I kind of wonder, I like where the movie ends, but you kind of wonder, you hope that the Doctor realizes, like, I think Gant has some wrong ideas, obviously, but I think the Doctor could realize that, like, these people, they're all hypocrites and they've all hurt people and done terrible things to get where they are too. And he's a doctor and he should heal them, despite what John Gant says. But he was really trying to exert a control over a situation that he shouldn't have been trying to exert control over. That's not his job.
I kind of like that there's some intellectual ambiguity of what's going to happen to the Doctor, because like, we end on the Doctor throwing the hammer at Gantz and breaking his arm. And the Doctor like immediately realizes like he's broken his oath, and he's a little shooken up by it. And I like that the movie kind of just ends at that point. Like there's a level of intellectual and moral ambiguity that doesn't always exist in Westerns of that, like later Westerns, after the Hays Code and just some Westerns that I think are better, there is a level of moral ambiguity, and like there's more of an in-depth thematic idea to things than some earlier stuff. Like I love the Magnificent Seven, but there isn't a ton of ambiguity to that story necessarily. But like I like that the Doctor character is like, what's going to happen to him? He's probably going to go back to being a doctor. Is he going to think everybody's good? Is he going to realize everybody's a hypocrite? Maybe this one moment ruins his whole life. You kind of don't know,
Yeah, I hope he's a sadder and wiser Doctor. Actually, he offers to look at Gant's arm, and Gant's like, nah.
Yeah.
Like, whatever.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if Gant's even disappointed in the Doctor, but he doesn't seem to be. I think he just kind of...
I think that Gantz gets a kick out of the fact that he's made this Doctor break his oath, and he's really had this effect on the Doctor.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what seems to be his thing, is everybody's a hypocrite, and he finds somebody who doesn't seem to be a hypocrite, and he's almost like satisfied that his own worldview, Gantz's own worldview, has maybe been proven right. Although I don't know that it has, but certainly the character thinks that it has.
And so in the updated Wikipedia, it says something about it as like the seventh seal of Westerns, and there's a chess match and everything. But there is this kind of funny, like, good, bad pull going on in it. And
there could even be Seventh Seal there's a lot of the Seventh Seal that's about religion and Christianity that I don't fully understand. I don't know if No Name on the Bullet has a lot of that or not.
No, but it definitely has that kind of dichotomy going through it of the pull of good and evil on these people. And I kind of love just these side stories, like that one couple where clearly like they screwed this guy over, and we keep cutting back to the woman. I guess there is another woman who just keeps talking about how, like, I can't remember who it is, but like, Pete wouldn't even bother to come after us. That's our punishment. We're stuck together. Like, there's this, like, the whole drama hinted at that we never get the full story on.
Yeah, yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but I need to rewatch it. That's one that I should show Jill,
but it goes back to, I think I like it because it's not your typical Western that's just about like male posturing and who's like Yojimbo, which I watched recently, and it's a very good movie. It's visually much better than No Name on the Bullet. Toshiro Mifune's acting is amazing, but it's all about like who's exerting power over who. And
it's more traditional in terms of its
and like
focus.
Mifune is like the strongest swordsman, and he does a lot of psychological play, but he also just kills a bunch of people because he's the best at swording, Whereas Gant is like, he doesn't want to fight. Like he's just, like his exertion, he only shoots because he has to, and he doesn't like it because he's not being paid to at that moment.
Yeah, I kind of like that aspect to it too. There's a lot of Westerns are, focused on, guns and all, that kind of, not necessarily battles, but some Westerns do that, but it's about, the man, his gun, and what he can do with it. Like something like Shane is, a more explorative movie on that topic, but like it's exploring that topic because that's what Westerns are about. I haven't seen the endless amounts of crummy Westerns that were released,
I've probably seen more crummy Westerns than you because I didn't like good Westerns very much. So, but I mean, even in Yojimbo, even like the motivation for him, he's almost there to prove something. Like no one's paying him to go into that town and do that. He's just kind of like sees something wrong and wants to fix it. And it's like, well, why are you?
Yojimbo, to me, Yojimbo is more symbolic. Like certainly on a practical level, like I think the character Yojimbo shows up and is kind of like, oh, these guys are all creeps, I'm gonna fuck with them, is almost more what like the premise of that story is. But to me, there's a symbolic nature of like he is a symbolism for kind of what that situation ends, how that situation ends. Like he's the person doing it, but he is actually just like that concept. So like it works for me on the level of like the plot level, on the logistical level of him doing these things and that, but it's also kind of more about conceptually what he represents. So I don't know.
Anyway, it's just interesting. I'm glad that you like No Name on the Bullet as much as you do, because it's just, like I saw it on AMC or TCM or something a million years ago, and I was like, wait, this is actually good. Like I actually really like this.
There's a movie that Audie Murphy did called The Quiet American by Joseph Mankiewicz that probably most people haven't seen because it's not particularly good. It's more like if you're into Mankiewicz or a certain older film, it's like a paranoia, like I don't know if it's like what does Wikipedia call it? Wikipedia what is it, poster? Where's your genre thing? I don't know. It's like a political, it's not really political, it's like a paranoia thriller, and he plays a character in it that's kind of interesting. He doesn't really, I mean, it's where I found out who he was. And later when you were talking about him, I think about Westerns and we watched the No Name on the Bullet and other stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, he isn't a very good act. I knew of him and I knew that he wasn't a very good actor because he's in the Quiet American and I didn't think he did that well in it. Not that the movie's particularly bad.
He's very limited.
Yeah, like I think he's great in No Name on the Bullet, but he's kind of great because he gets to play against type. And it's not like he's not going, nobody in that movie is particularly going for realism. It's kind of a fantastic, there's a Western fantasy element to it, but
yeah.
Anyways, I always keep thinking back to this movie because like nobody's seen it and it's kind of an odd little film. And
no, I mean to watch it. It's one of the weird ones I didn't watch. I haven't seen all of Audie Murphy's movies either by any means, but I've seen, a chunk of them, but a lot of them blur together because he's got, he's just got a ridiculous name and there's a girl and there's a fight, like it's that kind of thing. So
yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about.
I should be wrapping up because I do have things I have to go do.
You need to go exercise and such.
Yeah, and I feel like I ended up talking more about No Name on the Bullet than you at the end of the day, but
I mostly agree with you, and it's been a little longer since I saw it. The other movie I wanted to talk about, and we don't have to talk a lot about, is This Magnificent Cake.
Yeah.
So, again, I mean, spoilers for this, I guess. It's not the kind of movie that, like, you spoil a certain way exactly, but it's about Belgian occupied Congo. I think in terms of time, it's before like the date I found on Wikipedia that said 1908 to whatever date. So maybe it's not that I don't really understand the history. And as I put in my Instagram post, I want to know more, but man, it is a fascinating, beautiful, horrifying little film. It is only, I think, 44 minutes, and it is some of the most poignant, storytelling and character work.
Yeah, well, King Leopold II, and I just looked this up because no, I do not know this off the top of my head, was ruler from like 1865 to 1905, so it was a long time. I only know about any of this from talking to one friend about it who lived in Africa, not anywhere near the Congo. But yeah, they just took everything from that area and then didn't acknowledge it at all in any way, shape, or form. And there's a huge conversation that could be had about colonization and so on. But I was reading something about the filmmakers and they were like, yeah, we can't possibly do that justice in an animated felt movie. So instead we did this. And I liked it in what I came up with for the Instagram, which I think is what I do think is, you could show the visceral horror that happened to the people who were living there. But that's like very kind of like momentary and so on. And I feel like what they did instead was like the casual horror of it, which just kind of makes you feel like, there's not a ton of natives in the animation. It's more focused on the Belgians or the European, but what happens to them is not good. It's terrible.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's just terrible, and the Europeans don't care, and so you get left with that without that being the focal point, and instead it's these really creepy, abstract stories that I liked. I liked it a lot. It's one of my favorite things I've seen this year. It didn't come out this year, but like just that I've watched.
Yeah, I was trying to look up the directors on this to see like the crew. I think the crew is Belgian. I don't think they're Congolese. Is that what you would call it? I'm not sure. But and I think it. There's always, right now there's a lot of discussion about like people telling their own stories, and it's mostly in reference to like minorities and people who haven't gotten to traditionally tell their stories, telling their stories. So part of me wonders like, if there's a, I think the cast, including, well, actually, no, some of the names here look like they might be African, if not Congolese. But like, I wonder how much, this feels like a story told from the people who, from a Belgian perspective, and I would want to see a story like this told from the Congolese perspective. But this is also an example to me of like, you want stories from everyone.
Right.
Because this is a very self-reflective story of people who, again, I don't actually know enough about this movie, and there is not a lot of information about it. I couldn't even tell you if the people who made this are Belgian, though I assume they are.
I'm pretty sure they are.
But like, where it's like, you have to be able, like, people need to be self-reflective, and like this Magnificent Cake feels very self-reflective, and a part of that is like, I think the movie is partially about like how negligence and, as you say, it's like casual horror. So it's like the casual horror of negligence and ignorance. Like, you know, it's the second or third, I think the second story is about Ota, the pygmy man who works at the hotel. And like his story is, it's just, he's the guy who wears an ashtray on his head, which is kind of horrifying in its own right. And the story ends with him getting crushed by a piano for that some child has, you know, knocked over.
Because no one's paying attention to them. So it's like it's like he's one of the more humane characters in the 5 stories of the animation, and no one's watching this kid, and this kid just causes his death. I mean, which is probably, you know, a good.
Yeah, it's like it's so simple a story, really. Like, you know, we kind of learn who Ota is. He helped, you know, this child has also thrown a dog out a window, not a high window, but a window, and this, you know, so that Ota goes to help this dog, and like there's that humanity there, and like this interaction he has with someone from his is it a tribe? I guess from his community comes to see him, and like like, it's so simple, kind of how the story is laid out. And this movie is kind of the perfect example to me of like, you, in a slow, ponderous movie, you need to give space and air to give the viewer time to think about the complex undercurrents of what is happening. Like, in some ways, I almost wonder if this movie ages particularly well or not, depending on how much you know about that particular region or what the future looks like. Maybe the future is a utopia where everybody is happy, and then you watch this movie and you're like, I don't understand what it's about. But in this world, you totally know what it's about, because it's like about, you know, well, racism and colonialism, and it's like, so it's like really simple, but because because we bring something to it, and because it is very subtly sort of like, there's no wasted movement. And because of that, even though it's a simple story that kind of doesn't have a lot going on, there is a lot of space, because you need that space to think about the complex undercurrent.
Yeah.
And, you know, so
and
like
it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be educational or anything like that. It's just,
no, it's evocative of a feeling, which is, I think, generally a good use of film. I also, this is kind of an anthology film, because it's, I think, 5 different stories. I was wrong on both counts. And this is one of the rare anthology films where I probably liked the Oda story. I probably thought the Oda story was the best one, but it's so doesn't matter. Like, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, like I can pick out which of the stories in that I liked better. Like, it's not hard. They were all good, but like definitely some were better. Whereas this one, like, you kind of need all the pieces to have the full thing work.
There's a little bit of continuity between them too, which is interesting.
Yeah, I like the
clarinet player.
Yeah, the clarinet player, like, and the second story that he shows, you know, the third story that he shows up in with the Lost Porter or whatever. It's just so. It's like, it's so tragic. You couldn't do that as a movie, because the point is that the story doesn't go on.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. It was a beautiful movie, and you know, I've been thinking about it since we watched it.
Yeah.
I get points for having found it, right? I think you already said I did.
You totally. I already gave you points. I can give you more if you need them.
I would like some more points. Okay, we should probably wrap this up, because you have things to do, and I should go do things, and I don't even know if Joe is awake yet. All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye to all the people watching this. If you're watching this, I'm going to end the recording now.